Hey guys, we're in the studio today and I'm just gonna jump over to my machine and show you some techniques that I use when working with knit fabrics. So we'll touch on the use of the interfacing on the fabric, and then as we sew with the different stitches that we use on the machine, I'll show the neckline and the hemline. We'll also touch on using a twin needle for your hemline. And then we'll work through some issues where I can show how pressing with steam will help work out any of the wavy or wonky type seams that you get sometimes when using a standard machine on your knits. All right, let's get started. Here we have the basic t-shirt cut out, and you can see that I've applied along the neckline edges that 1/4 inch strip of interfacing. And this is a fusible interfacing for use with knit fabric, so it has stretch allowed or built into it. So I have it on the neckline on the back piece, as well as the wrong side of the neckline on the front piece. Here we have the shoulder seam of the t-shirt, and it's pinned right sides together. So we're just gonna straight stitch this, and I just use a regular straight stitch 1/4 inch seam allowance on the shoulder seam. And now you can see here on my machine it feeds fine. I didn't have anything jam up at the beginning, and part of that could be because the interfacing helps give it a little bit of stability. Here you can see the shoulder seam, and you can see that it's stretched out a little bit right in there, especially in the middle. Now I think my stitch right now is a straight stitch at 2.5, and I think if I lengthened it a little bit, maybe set it at 3, I would lose that and it wouldn't stretch out while it's sewing. The stitches are pretty small. So we can go over to our iron and press this with steam, and I think it'll shrink back. I'll show you. And on the other shoulder, I'll increase the stitch and you'll see the difference. And here we have that same shoulder again, and I've pressed that with steam, and now you can see it's pretty flat. There's no stretching out on that seam. Now here we have the other shoulder sewn with a 3 length stitch, and it's a little bit smoother. You can see that it's not stretched out as much. So on this particular fabric, that seems like a good stitch length to use. At this point, you can decide what to do with your shoulder seam. You can leave it as is since the knit fabric doesn't fray. You can zigzag it with the 2 seam allowances together, and the zigzag will cover the edge, and then you would just press it back. I would press it towards the back of the shirt. Or you can trim it and press the seam open, which I think, because you're gonna lose a little bit on both sides by turning the neck under and sewing on the sleeve for the shoulder, it's okay to just press the seam open. It'll make hemming the neckline easier and smoother, and not very much of it will be exposed. I have the t-shirt on the ironing board, and I'm just working to press the seams open, and I have a little bit of steam going, which helps hold the press. And then I'm going to carefully work my way pressing the neckline. So we'll use this interfacing as our guide. So we have a 1/4 inch already marked on here, and the first fold we'll just press right along that edge, and we'll turn the whole neckline all the way around. You can see that's curling up a little bit, but it's fine. When we get it on the machine, it still has this nice pressed edge. Here we have the neckline hem, and it's pressed under just 1 time. And I'm gonna sew from the top of the fabric, because that way I can control how the stitching is gonna look on the right side. So I'm gonna take that, and I'm just gonna turn it 1 more time as I feed it through my sewing machine. So I'm just gonna slide this under the foot, and you can see that I have the threads out in the back, and I'm pushing it through so that part of it is extending out the back. Now, another tip, when I start this, I'm gonna hold these threads back here like this. When I start sewing, I'll pull on them gently to prevent the fabric from going down into the feed dogs. So if I pull on that a little bit, it keeps it going, and then none of that is jammed down. Then we'll just continue to turn the hem under, and then slowly hem all the way around the neckline. Now you can see on this neckline, it's a little bit stretched out, especially over on this side. So we're just gonna take our iron with steam and we're just gonna lightly press, but really not pushing that hard on the fabric itself, letting the steam just sort of cover it and do the work for it. So I'll just come around and you can hear the steam, you can see the steam. And that shrinks that up really nice and tight. So our neckline is now the size that it should be. Now let's take a quick look at a sleeve hem. So here we have the pattern piece for the short cap sleeve that goes with the t-shirt. Here we have the piece with just the interfacing ironed onto the wrong side. And then here we have a piece that I've run through the machine that has a double turn hem. So this one looks a little bit stretched out. When you double turn the hem, you basically lose the underarm part of the sleeve, which will go right into the seam allowance. So the cap sleeve is what's showing on the shirt, and there's not really any sleeve under the doll's arm, like in the armpit area. So 2 quick tips with this one. You can take your pattern piece and you can lay this on top of it, and then just look at how much overstretching has happened, if any, with the pattern piece compared to your piece of fabric. Now it looks like on this one I have a little bit over on this side, and you can see that. So I think what we'll do, as long as we have our back stitching far enough, we can just trim that off to line up exactly with the pattern piece. We could also press this sleeve piece with a little bit of steam and see if it'll just shrink back on its own. And you can already see it now, sort of regaining the shape of the actual pattern piece. So now we'll try that again, and we'll lay this piece on top of the pattern piece. And you can see here that I still have a little tiny bit on that side, so I could trim that off. It looks like about 1/8 of an inch. But other than that, the sleeve piece matches up, and you can see that I've double folded my hem, so I have those hem lines visible right here. Now I'm just gonna show you a quick finishing technique on this seam. And this seam right here is the sleeve connected to the t-shirt. So we're just gonna do a simple larger size zigzag that will cover the entire edge. Now when I run mine through, I have this pretty far over so that the outside edge of the zigzag will actually cover the edge, not poke through the fabric. So you can see right there we have a finished edge on the inside of the sleeve, and then when I fold this open, I'm just gonna press that so that the seam allowance is pressed back towards the neckline for the sleeve to lay flat like that. Another edge finishing tip for knits, or for any fabric for that matter, is to zigzag your edges before sewing your seams. So then that way you can press your seams open. So on the fabrics, I like to do it with the wrong side up because the zigzag tends to roll the fabric in back towards the fabric. So it kind of turns it under slightly. So I'll set this in with a little bit sticking out behind the base of the foot. And I'm pretty far over so that my zigzag will come around the edge of the fabric. And then I'll just sew straight up along the seam allowance line. And then just make sure that your needle is in the down position when you get close to where the sleeve connects so it doesn't get stuck. And I'll just raise it so that I know that I have that sleeve hem under my foot, and then we'll finish it. And then here we have that edge of the fabric with the zigzag right along the edge, and we'll press that with steam and it'll flatten it out nicely. Now let's work on hemming a t-shirt. So we have the t-shirt sewn up until the point where we've sewn the side seams. And we have these side seams finished separately so that we can press them open. So we're just gonna press them gently. Now we have a piece of interfacing, and we've cut this into a strip that is 1/4 inch wide. So this is a fusible interfacing for knits, and you can see if I pull on it, it stretches slightly. So that's the right one to use on a knit fabric hemline. So we're gonna start by applying the interfacing at the center back edge, and then we'll just press it carefully right along the edge. And you just wanna do it very quickly so that it doesn't melt, and you don't wanna really slide or pull. Just press it down and it'll secure to the edge of the t-shirt. Now the first hem that we're gonna show you, you'll use this 1/4 inch strip as your guide. Fold it one time right along the edge, and then we'll fold it one more time, and we'll pin that along the whole bottom edge of the shirt. Then we're just gonna hem the shirt with the right side up. So I have it pressed under twice. Underneath here, we're gonna do it just under 1/4 inch seam allowance, and then I'm gonna slide this under so it extends about 1/4 or 1/2 inch behind the back of the foot, just so that it doesn't bunch up and get stuck in the feed dogs. Then when we start, I'm gonna hold these threads back here, and as I make my first couple stitches, I'm just gonna pull them gently, and it'll keep the fabric from jamming up in the back. Now this fabric tends to want to stretch a little bit, so I'm just guiding it along the edge of the presser foot. And you can see already in the back here, it's actually stretching out quite a bit. Now you can see on this particular t-shirt and this knit, this hem is actually stretched out quite a bit, even with the interfacing. So I'm just gonna show you how to steam that out, and it will shrink back. So we have the iron and we have a steam on. And as we press down on there, and I'll just do this one side just so you can see, it's flattened out considerably, a lot. So we have this side, and then you can still see this side. And the trick is really just kind of keep it up like that so that it can force it to shrink back. Don't try to stretch that out like that and hem it stretched out. And that steam's really helping that to lay much flatter. So we got a little bit left there. Still wants to pucker a little bit, so I'm just gonna lightly steam that. So now we look at it, we got a little bit left, so I'm just gonna keep steaming it. And that really helps shrink that back. And another thing I'll note here too, depending on your fabric, some fabrics may require a pressing cloth to cover most of it. You don't want to get an extra sheen or iron marks on your fabric. With this one, it seems fine, and it's actually pressing really nicely. This is a rayon blend knit or a rayon jersey. So there we have that, and it looks like a finished hem. So if I fold this shirt under, you can see that the hem there is really laying pretty flat, and it's shrunk back quite a bit. Here I'm going to show you how to do a hem on a t-shirt using a single fold and a twin needle. So we're going to start with that fusible knit interfacing, and this is cut at 1/2 inch wide. So we'll start by lining up the interfacing with the center back, and we'll press it down so that it's secured to the wrong side of the t-shirt. And we'll do that along the entire bottom edge of the shirt. So we're just gonna fold up the hemline, and this will be a 1/2 inch hem instead of 2 turns at 1/4 of an inch. So we'll have a raw edge at the top, but the double needle will cover this back side. And we'll just press this to give it a nice crease. And then we're gonna take it over to the sewing machine. Now, I just have a few quick tips for setting up your machine to sew with a twin needle. So first, you're gonna need your machine, and you'll have 1 spool of thread. Then my machine here has an extra spool holder, so I have that there, and I'm gonna have my secondary spool of thread. And for this example, I'm gonna use 2 different colors. But generally, you would have the same color, and then probably the same color as your bobbin. Then we also have a twin needle. You can see that right there. So that fits in where your needle goes in your machine, and it has 2 needles, and we're gonna thread 1 with each color thread. Now here I'm just gonna show you, we're gonna stick this needle in here. So on this machine, I'm just gonna take this out, and my needle comes out. And then I have the twin needle, and it has a flat side on the back, just like a regular needle. And we're gonna slide that right up in there. And tighten that down. And then you can see right here, I have 2 needles coming out. Okay, once we have the needle securely in place and we have the 2 spools of thread up on the top, the thread goes through together. So you thread the whole machine holding both threads at the same time. So I'm down here at the end where I have my last final part, and here is where I'll separate the 2 threads. So you can see right here that I have a blue and a purple. Okay, now you can see right here, I have the needles threaded. We have a purple thread and a blue thread in the top needle, and then we have a single blue bobbin thread right here. Now we're gonna take the t-shirt, and you can see right here, we have this folded under, and this was a 1/2 inch hem folded under, and we have the interfacing inside there. Now I'm gonna look right here, and I have this folded back so that I can see my seam allowance marking. And I am gonna look, and I want this edge of this fabric to go right in between my 2 needles. So I'm looking over here to the left where I'm gonna line this up, and it looks like it'll line up right here with this line, which is just exactly at my 1/2 inch seam allowance line. So then I'll know from the front as I'm sewing to keep that lined up, and I'll have the zigzag cover the back of that raw edge. Now I have the threads right here, and I'm gonna hold them with my fingers, and I'm gonna pull on them gently as I start sewing so that the fabric doesn't go down into the feed dogs. Now you can see that both needles are going down, and I'm gonna keep my seam allowance lined up, and we're gonna feed that right through. Now there's a little bit of trial and error with that one, and we'll see if we got that lined up on the back side. So it looks like on this one I missed in a few spaces, but you can see right here where the zigzag is catching that. So if you line it up exactly right, you'll get the double needle look on the front side, and it will still have stretch in it. So it can stretch, and then the zigzag will cover the back. And this is pretty visible because I'm using a thread with a high contrast, but if you're using thread that's the same color as your fabric, it'll look nice and smooth on both sides. Now you can see with the twin needle, it still has a little bit of a bumpy hemline. It's not too bad, just a little bit. So we're just gonna press this with steam. And you can see that that smooths that out. very nicely. And that helps that to shrink back, and then you have a nice looking hemline right there, and you can see the 2 stitch lines on there. That has a nice amount of stretch in there. Now here's another tip for sewing with knits. This right here is a coffee filter, just from a regular coffee pot, and I've ironed it flat. And then we have a jersey knit right here that we just have double folded for a hem around the neck, and we've pressed it and pinned it. So I'm just gonna run this through the sewing machine with the coffee filter sewn at the same time as the fabric, and we'll see how that looks with the finished hem. So here we are at the sewing machine, and we're halfway in. So I'm just gonna finish sewing around the edge of this hemline, and I'm just doing a regular straight stitch. And the coffee filter is under the t-shirt. And you can see already this is coming around the back, the full curve. It's actually not stretching out at all. So here you can see this as I spin it around. This is actually sewn pretty smooth. The stitching looks really good. You can see on here that it looks really clean. It's really smooth. So the trick on this one is gonna be if it tears off. So here we have it on the back side, and I'm gonna try to just tear this right off. So we'll see what happens. So it looks like it will tear right out of that hemline. And there is no residue on the backside at all, which is what you'll get when you do that with tissue paper. Oh, there's a tiny little piece right there. But for the most part, it's really clean, and it looks really good, really smooth. It's not stretched out. So this is a great trick, and I think you could use this on the sleeve hems or the base hemline. You just need a couple filters, coffee filters. And like I said, I pressed mine flat, and that was a great one. Great tip for sewing a neckline on your knit fabrics.